Welcome everybody to Energized Impact Podcast episode 3, man. We got an exciting one chalked up today. We're going to be talking about one of the most common diets that gets misused and misrepresented in the fitness community with intermittent fasting. I got my boy Brady here to help me talk about it.
What's good, y'all?
And then we're going to talk about how to time your workouts to get the most out of it. How can you optimize your workouts by influencing and implementing rest periods in that? And to help us with that, we got our boy Zach Atkins back in the building.
What's good?
So without further ado, we're just going to go ahead and dive right into this bad Jackson and get this thing rolling. Cue intro music. Do-do-do-do. All right, so I got Brady Barefoot back with me here to help discuss intermittent fasting. But what I'm going to do before I even proc him with some questions, get him involved in this, is I'm going to explain exactly what intermittent fasting is. If you don't know, it is just taking your diet and condensing it. So instead of going from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep as being a window of availability for you to munch on some food, to get some delicious grub on, it is meaning that you're going to put yourself in an 8-hour constrained time window of where you're allowed to get your calories in from. For example, two of the most common times that seem to be the most beneficial for parties, allow your window of eating to be from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. or from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. Now, the common thing is, even though those times are different, they only allow you up to 8 hours to eat. We see why diets fail, right? Diets fail because you're constricting yourself way too much. You're sitting there not allowing yourself any flexibility, and you're literally just looking at yourself in the morning and you're like, you can't eat this, you can't eat that, but here's a plate of greens, be happy and be on your way. And that's not sustainable. That's not realistic to expect yourself to be able to stay consistent with something that is just bland and plain and simple and boring. What proof do we have that intermittent fasting actually works versus just caloric restriction? The basic diet is a caloric restriction, and that's how a lot of people will try and diet, is just, all right, I got 2,000 calories. Let me cut about 500 out because I think that's what's going to work. And they get upset about it because they fall off the wagon, man. So the National Institute for Health actually did a study regarding how intermittent fasting versus caloric restriction actually goes against each other in a battle of being preventative towards type 2 diabetes in adults. Now, we see intermittent fasting through this study, off the glucose baseline levels, there was a 3 to 6% decrease. Now, that's not huge, but that can be crucial to somebody that's experiencing anything with health issues revolving around diabetes. While the caloric restriction study showed that there was no effect after 6 to 12 weeks of dieting. So, in general, the insulin concentrations were reduced by 20 to 31% after 8 to 12 weeks of intermittent fasting, which, I don't know about y'all, but that shit's crazy. That's a pretty heavy drop, and it's not sporadic. We don't see that it goes over a large interval. It's condensed to being within 11% range with all participants of this study. Now, on the other hand, caloric restriction has a wider window, 11 to 41% after 6 to 12 weeks of just doing a basic caloric restriction diet. Now, honestly, the reductions of the insulin concentrations is mostly related to the degree of your weight loss. We see that some people with caloric restrictions have, off of deductive reasoning, let's get scientific with this, deductive reasoning on these studies, you have a large window where some people saw results and some people didn't off of caloric restriction, but we see a more consistent standard with the intermittent fasting. Now, we're going to go ahead and branch off, and I'm going to get Brady involved in this. Brady, what's your opinion on intermittent fasting? How do you feel about it? Does it get you fired up? Does it get you ready to go? Or what do you feel about it?
So personally, for an athlete like myself, I don't think intermittent fasting would be too good. I've seen athletes try to do this, and it's just hard because of the time window that they have. might be limited due to practice or due to lifts or due to something like that. And it is hard for them to get in that 8 hours, 2 or 3 meals that they should have. And so there was actually a study done that if you don't eat in that a certain amount of time, or you take your body to the extremes and don't eat during those times, your body actually produces more cortisol, and which is the body's natural hormone of stress. So that could actually add stress to whatever you're doing already throughout the day. And so my personal opinion is, if you're a seasoned lifter or a seasoned just person that knows about nutrition and stuff like that, that it is actually good, I would implement it for them. But for athletes, I would not.
So with that being said, man, we would implement it not so much for athletes, but somebody that's a seasoned vet, got a little gray gristle going on with them in their respective industry. But we can also see that for a college student, right? If you have the knowledge to implement this, if you have the knowledge to do it, because think about it, man, if you're in college or even if you're a young adult, we're all grinding away trying to get ahead in life, trying to get out of this rat race. So we kind of restrict ourselves unwillingly to where we skip meals, we lose track of time, and we get sidetracked with all the stuff we're grinding away at. So if you're just your average Joe, right, this is something you could really look into and possibly benefit from, because you're already seeing a restriction in your diet because you say you have classes from 8 to 11, right? You're not going to be able to get your food in unless you package it, pre-plan it, and bring it with you. But the thing is, if you restrict yourself, you don't have to go too crazy. If you sit there and say, all right, I got class in the mornings until about 12 o'clock, I'm going to set my window to 12 to 8. You would have time to be flexible with your diet. So if you want to stay consistent and stay on track with it, you can sit there and look at it in this perspective. I got only 8 hours to eat, no calories before or after that period's done. What can I do and what sacrifices can I make? Can I afford to have that damn brownie? Yes, you absolutely can. But again, it boils down to moderation and consciousness of the decisions you make with your diet. Now, we see it increase the cortisol levels, and we already see that Brady brought up the increased cortisol levels off of intermittent fasting, so I'm not going to sit there and give you my praise of intermittent fasting being the holy grail because of my personal beliefs and personal bias. So I'm actually going to allow Brady to take over again and tell us, what do you think these increased cortisol levels mean for somebody that is on their daily grind trying to escape the rat race? Whether it be a college student or just somebody grinding away, trying to make ends meet and elevate their life.
So again, like I said, it's going to increase the cortisol levels, which is the body's natural hormone for stress. So if you're the average Joe in college and you already got a bunch of stress and stuff like that, this wouldn't be the right dieting plan that you should go with, because like I said, it increased the cortisol. So once you do that, it's adding extra stress to your body already, and the average Joe doesn't need that. So
I mean, let's be real. A lot of us college students are already running low on serotonin, so we don't really need that increased cortisol because we're already feeling pretty weak, man. All right, Brady, man, I appreciate you coming out and giving both perspectives on intermittent fasting and helping me out with this, man. I appreciate it. I know you're busy as hell with football. You guys got this next game, ring season, ring chasing right now,
yes,
trying to get this ring for Bridgewater.
Yes, sir. Hail Eagles, baby.
And this is actually going to bring us into our second segment, where we're going to talk about how to optimize your rest periods to allow for you to benefit the most from your workouts, and how we do that. And that's where Zach Atkins is going to come in and help us talk about this a little bit. So we sit there and we see, right, a lot of people who are inexperienced and maybe don't know the most about training and working out. They kind of just sit around, play on their phones in between each set, and they don't really pay attention to how much time they're actually taking away from their workout to quote-unquote recover. Now, to be extremely beneficial in your workouts, you need to understand what type of workout plan you are in right now. So if you're building, you're obviously going to be doing a lot less reps, but a lot higher weight. And that's going to be more intensive and more strenuous on your muscles, in the sense that they're going to need a little more time to recover to perform optimally in the situation. So if you're sitting there doing 6 sets of 3, you're going to want to sit there and make sure you're taking about 2 minutes to 3 minutes to rest in between each set to make sure you're rejuvenated and recovered enough to be able to perform at your best and put out maximal effort in that lift, whether it be your bench or your squat or your deadlift. Now, counter to that, you have the low weight, high rep workout where you might be doing anywhere from 10 to 25 reps per set. And that's going to be more so to allow you to cut, get those striations, get that more lean look to your body and your aesthetics. So when you're doing these high reps, low weight movements, you need to sit there and cut back the time you have to rest. So instead of having that 2 to 3 minute rest period, you're going to be sitting at about anywhere from maybe 30 seconds to a minute. The common thing is about 45 seconds of rest between each high rep set. When you're setting up your workout and when you're setting up what it is you want to do and how you want to train, you need to also plan accordingly to allow you to have the adequate rest implemented in your workout so that you can account for how much time you're actually going to spend in the gym, because I know not all of us have an hour and a half to 2 hours to spend in the gym. Sometimes we got to get that 45-minute pump, get juicy with it, and get out. So you need to plan accordingly with your rest. So this is where Zach's going to come in and help us talk about the different kind of outputs he's realized with his athletic past and his athletic history, how he has seen it benefit with his rest across his training. So Zach, what is one of the most common things with you being a football player? What's one of the most common types of lifting that you do where it requires minimal to very little rest?
Well, something that we do often that requires very minimal rest would be something called a cluster. And a cluster can be done in many different ways, but it usually revolves around doing anywhere between like 2 to 5 repetitive sets with only 20 to 23 seconds of rest in between. And it really, depending on how much reps you do each set, is going to change the main focus of what the goal is going to be and getting the workout, the output that you want out of it by giving a certain input. So if you're going to do a cluster, say 888, that's going to be more aerobic focused, condition focused, and it's going to get your heart rate up, stuff like that. But if you were going to do something more along the lines of 531, which would be at a heavier percentage of your max, it's going to be more focused on, breaking down that muscle and building strength. And you're going to probably want a little bit of longer rest periods for that than you will for something that's more going to be more conditioning focused.
All right, sweet. And like you talked about these clusters, what do you know the exact reason why these things might be beneficial for somebody?
Well, usually it's going to be more of a mental type thing for a team sport, or say something like the military. It's going to want to push that, whole I want to quit agenda in your mind that you just can't give into. So that's what really has been the biggest change for me with doing clusters with Coach Beach in our weight room. Is it's all a mental thing, and it just builds a lot of strength and confidence that you might not have knew you had before.
So what you're saying, and I'm going to put this a little unfiltered for any listener that's underage, the whole point of a cluster isn't to kind of make you grow and be a swole dude. It's meant to fucking destroy you and make you an absolute animal, both mentally and physically. But all right, man, thanks, Zach, for coming out. I know you guys are busy, and the same with Brady. You guys got that big game this weekend, man, so I appreciate you taking the time to come talk to me and kind of share your insight. That's going to kind of conclude this episode of Energized Impact. Again, just want to say shout out to these two young, beautiful gents for helping me out. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in and hopefully getting a further understanding of how there's different training styles and different nutritional paths you can take. But what's crucial is whether you're doing intermittent fasting, whether you're doing a basic caloric restriction, or whether you're doing keto, find what works for you. In life, man, we have a lot of different things, both from a fitness journey to a personal journey. And we can sit there and have people tell us how we need to live, how we need to think, and how we need to act. But ultimately, what's going to determine the most beneficial thing for you is really listening to yourself. Understanding what works for you isn't going to always work for Johnny that's got 1,000 followers or 1 million followers on Instagram. That shit doesn't matter. What matters is understanding what it takes to become the best possible version of you. And that's going to be, again, like I've been stressing over the last 2 episodes, that trial and error point of perspective. You need to push past. You got to have these cluster warfares, as Zach put out there, to kind of develop that mentality to allow you to pursue the best possible version of yourself. So again, thank you all for tuning in. I'm your host, Drake, signing off. And as always, be sure to energize that impact in some way, some shape, or some form. Peace and chicken grease.